Welcome back to the Bolt Podcast. I'm Todd Bertsch, your guide on this exciting journey of personal growth and leadership, where my guests and I will share personal stories from our transformational journeys of how small changes can lead to massive results. You'll discover tips on overcoming obstacles, setting and achieving goals, building lasting habits, developing confidence, living a happy, healthy, and positive life, and so much more. If you're ready to cultivate a growth mindset and become the best version of yourself, then let's ignite your growth today. I'm thrilled to welcome today's guest, Marc Majers, to the show. With over 25 years of experience, Marc has made a significant impact as a user experience leader, having held key positions at major Fortune 500 companies like Hyland and Progressive, where he currently serves as the head of user research. Marc's devotion to education shines through in his roles as a web design instructor at Cuyahoga Community College, University of Akron, and Kent State University. He also contributes to the community as a mentor with UXPA International. Beyond his professional achievements, Marc is also an accomplished author, having penned notable works such as Make Your Customers Dance, The Key to User Experience is Knowing Your Audience, and Don't Fear the Forward, The Secret to Building Successful Websites. Outside of his work, Marc enjoys spending quality time with his family and pursuing his passion for music. He's recorded 5 albums, co-hosts a music podcast called Tunesmate, and has been DJing special events for over 30 years. Listeners, this is going to be an amazing episode. Please enjoy my conversation with Marc Majers. Marc, it is so good to see you, my friend. Welcome to the Bolt Podcast.
Glad to be here. Thank you, Todd.
Man, that is quite a bio. I am always amazed by how much you've accomplished in your career, and in so many different areas. And there's a theme, that's stood out to me that I wanted to dig into, and that's a lifelong commitment to leading, learning, and mentoring. Those are commitments that are really near and dear to me, and I just love to dig into those. So your journey in UX has spanned over 25 years. How has your leadership style evolved over time?
Yeah, that's a good question. Hey, once again, Todd, thanks for having me here on the podcast. What's interesting is a lot of what I've been raised on, and if you think about this, it comes from your core when you start. And actually, I was in scouting early on, and if you are familiar with scouting, there's a lot of core. There's a scout law, Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful. You can go down the list.
Right.
Then you also think about the scout motto. But I think that's what started it all, was that I started leading there. And when you're a youth, you get the opportunity to be the senior patrol leader, and then you get a chance to lead an outing. And when you're out in the wilderness, it's you and the wilderness. Mm-hmm. So you really have to understand and be prepared for what you have to encounter out there. So I think that was the beginning of it, but then as it evolved, it led into a lot of mistakes. You think about the things you've done and you go, I'm not going to do that next time. Or you see a mistake that someone else had made and you go, why did they do that? And there's a lot of ways to learn, and I know we're going to get into this, but for me, it's just been a constant figuring out how to become better. And I think it came from just that early scouting connection, because you're earning merit badges, you're learning about new things, you're learning how to interact with people, you're trying to figure out how you can be part of a team, and also you have to learn yourself how to improve. So I think there's a lot of connection there.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, did you end up being an Eagle Scout?
I did, okay. Yeah, and that's a whole other story we can probably get into, but that was also a challenge because the Eagle Scout at that time, and they've evolved the requirements over the years, but you had to not only get merit badges and then be in their amount of time with requirements, but then you also had to do a service project. So if you think about that, if you start thinking about service projects and how that gets ingrained in you, you are helping others without expecting anything in return. Which, when you're young and you think about that, that doesn't make a lot of sense. You're like, well, wait a minute, no, I'm working. I should be earning some money, pay for something. So that started my mindset, and then I think from there, you work hard to get your ranks and move forward. So that just kind of instilled me, well, isn't that just how it is with everything? So then you start applying that. But as you move forward and you start trying to adapt to technology, to there's so many things that you think about when you go to a new school or when you get a new job. You keep learning and you keep moving forward and trying to understand how you can add value.
Yeah, I love it. And I think there's tremendous value in being in Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts. And it's funny, when I recruit and look for employees, if I see that they were a Scout, or especially an Eagle Scout, like absolutely, but I just think the program in general is a great way to train and get kids involved in early leadership. And the best part is servant leadership, right? That's it. It's not about what you take, it's about what you give. And there's just there probably should be an episode just on scouting and the principles of leadership and how that influences young people and the adults, because the adults, parents are really involved as well. So I love that you brought that in. And I knew that about you, but I forgot about it. So yeah, I would imagine that should be a great influence.
It starts you on the right, makes you start thinking about things, and it also allows you to explore a career path, which is always something interesting. You think about it, a lot of people, when you get into scouting, they say, well, look at all the merit badges. Did you become one of the things on there? And the strangest thing is, I never got the music merit badge. I never got the computing merit badge. And I wondered how I ended up, those were my two career passions. Maybe I had to find out what I didn't like, which also is something that's important in life.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's a great segue into just your passion. You're passionate about so many different things, and you're a very driven person. Where does that drive, where does that passion come from?
Yeah, that's interesting. So when I was young, I talked about scouting. I talked about the friends you surround yourself with. I had a best friend that had a photographic memory. I don't know if you know anybody with photographic memory, but you can close your eyes and you can basically get an A+ on every single test. That wasn't me. I had to write out note cards, I had to study hard, and in order to move through that. So that started making me think about what we take for granted. And then at a young age, I also found out that I was adopted. And when that happens, you start realizing, wait a minute, I shouldn't take what I have here, my family, for granted. And it makes you look around and go, I'm going to work harder. I'm going to work harder because I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. And you actually, it makes you think differently. And I'm involved in a couple nonprofits locally. One's called the Adopted Network. I'll check that. The Adoption Network Cleveland. And they've allow many that are adopted try to reconnect and understand who you are. And that's an interesting thing. If you think about your background, generally family is one of the first things that everyone asks you about. What's your background? What's your family from? And for many years I would say, I don't know. So that leaves you to just continually try to prove yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I love the focus, excuse me, on gratitude. I'm a big believer in gratitude. In fact, I start every morning with a 5 to 10 minute meditation. And part of that is reflection and going through a gratitude process. There's nothing better than that. That sets the tone for the whole day, right? It gets you in a positive mindset. It pushes back any negativity. And honestly, if you're living in that positive mindset and you're full of gratitude, it makes life a hell of a lot easier, you know. So yeah, that's a great mindset to be in.
Yeah, and what's interesting is over the years, you asked me about how leadership has, evolved. I think it's the other leaders you meet, and I had the opportunity to serve with many great leaders. One comes to mind where I would just pop in at the end of the day when I asked, another thing is, many leaders, you think they're busy, so you have to ask them, when is a good time? Is it ever a good time to pop in? And you can find different periods. Some say, come around the end of the day, I'm wrapping things up, I'm getting so I found one leader that said, yeah, if you ever just want to pop in, and it was a top executive at one of the companies I worked at, I would walk past their office and I'd always be busy and I'd poke my head in. And they told me, they said, whenever I go into a meeting, I'm always going in thinking I want to come out with a resolution. Like I'm going in with an open mind, and I want to come out with something. Sure, there's times where you come out with nothing, but that should only be about 1% of the time. But they also said something interesting to me is that you constantly have to stay humble, positive, and those are very difficult things to do on a daily basis because there's always something that seems to be detracting from that moment.
Right.
But as you turned me on to the positive intelligence, it says you acknowledge it and you say, okay, that happened, and move on.
Right.
And that is something that I've heard, but not until you start practicing that it really helps you move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you speak my language, positive intelligence. Shirzad Shameen, it's an amazing program, amazing book. I think I talk about it in every episode, so obviously it's been important to me. It really helped change my life, a big part of my transformation. But yeah, the key there is really finding the gift and the opportunity in every situation, every scenario. However bad it may be, there's a gift there. And it's funny, a lot of people, they look at you like, yeah, whatever, man. Like, yeah, I just got in a car accident. What's the gift there, buddy? Yeah, I know it sucks in the moment, but if you really dig deep and think about it, there is a gift. Maybe it's telling you to slow the hell down and pause in your life and be happy that you're still alive, and maybe it wasn't even worse. So it's a different mindset, and when you make that small shift, it's amazing what you can do, what you can achieve. So I love that. I'm glad that you enjoyed the book and you started practicing it. And it's like anything else, it takes time, and you need to be consistent and persistent to build that habit, that mental muscle to say, oh, okay, there is a gift here. Let me just pause, think about it, reflect. But I want to go back to a comment you made about leadership, and I love it. You had mentioned about being open-minded. I'm reading a book right now by Shannon Lee called Be Water, My Friend. That's Bruce Lee's daughter. Great book, not an autobiography, but she's really touching on what she's learned about her dad, because she was very young when unfortunately he passed. But one of the main concepts obviously is water, and we can talk about that all day, and it's wonderful. But one of his major concepts was going into everything with an open mind, and he calls it having an empty cup. So it's all about just being open and receiving. Again, finding that gift and opportunity, not being judgmental, but being discerning and really just taking it all in and then responding instead of being reactive. So all these things really do play into each other, right? It's a beautiful thing, but it takes time, and somebody really needs to make that part of their life and take action.
Yeah, something you just said struck me, because What's interesting is, and I know we've talked about this in the past, but it's about you're being open, but you're being open to new ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard. Sometimes you want to go and you want to try a new idea, and maybe the timing isn't right. So this gets into the draft box idea. So when we all have ideas, we probably think of them constantly, all the time, but can you do them? Is the timing right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you still need to do some more research on it. Maybe if I tell you right now, you're going to say no. Maybe I need to build an argument why that's a good idea. So put it in your draft box. Write it up. Put it in your email draft box and come back to it later. And sometimes, sure, your draft box may have hundreds
In your case.
of ideas, but then when you're in a conversation with someone and someone says, hey, I'm thinking about doing that, you already have the idea in your draft box, and within about 10 minutes when they get back to their desk or whatever they're going, all of a sudden they have something, hey, I'm just following up. You were talking about this, but have you thought about, and then, how did they do that?
Right.
Because I already thought about it probably a year ago, or maybe it was yesterday. And I think timing with ideas is key because we all have them, and I've been told my whole life, you're an idea guy, you come up with a lot of ideas. But you only can execute so many of them. So you have to be selective with the ideas you're going to come across with someone. But that helps in that being open moment, because if you're listening, and listening is part of that too, you're being a good listener,
Mm-hmm.
and being a good listener is even harder. To just sit and listen and not want to respond, and actually, I'm not trying to answer your question immediately, I'm actually listening for a second before I do that. And that also helps with the draft box idea, because then you're like, well, I already got an idea in the draft box.
Right.
I can listen easier. My attention doesn't have to be like, oh, I gotta get my idea out. I already got it.
Right. Yeah, and I think that all ties back to being able to pause. And really coming into a conversation, whether you're a leader or you're an employee, a student or whatever, coming in with an open mind, pausing, but with the mindset of being a coach, right? So you're there to ask good questions and to be an active listener and to guide, not to answer. Just, most people just want to talk. They want to get their ideas out. They want to be heard. And that's a win, right? And then you go from there. But yeah, I love that. And I want to come back to, and I would say too, I would coin you as the idea guy. You are just constantly coming up with tons of great ideas. How do you manage those ideas? Is it frustrating to have all of these ideas and only execute on a few of them? So if you're using this draft box strategy, and as I said, I've seen your draft box at times, 100 drafts in there, and not all of those are ideas. Some of those are just, you need to vent, right, and just get it out on paper, which we talked about. But what's your process for determining what you do and what you don't do? Because you have so many different passions. As we went through in your bio, you're an author, you love writing, you're an educator, you love teaching, you love mentoring. You have a huge passion for music. You write your own music. You record your music. You edit your music. You're a DJ. You also have your own podcast for many years. How do you manage? So you have a lot of passions and a lot of drive and a lot of ideas. How do you manage all of those things?
Really,
that's a loaded one, but.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, but I think there's a couple key things. One is, at an early age, I was told, and I believe it was one of my high school teachers that told me that, and it's a cliche, but it really sank in my brain, that you have to do something that you love. Mm-hmm. And if you love what you do, everything else will follow. And I always thought about that. I said, is that true? And it takes a lot of energy to think about that in itself. So if I just do what I love, then everything's going to work out. I don't know if that's true. So I started experimenting with that, and I said, okay, well, at an early age, I got a computer and I did computer programming, and I really liked that. So I started learning how to develop, and then at one point I went to college and I said, well, no, I'm going to let that go away. I think I'm going to become a lawyer. Yeah, that sounds good. So I was convinced by this professor that you'd be a really good lawyer. So I got accepted into law school. I was going to be a lawyer. And I came home from the summer and I told my mom, I go, you know, do I have to go to law school? I always wanted to be a radio DJ. Do you think I can try that? And my mom was so angry with me. She said, after all that, you're going to go be a radio DJ? She said, fine, take the summer off, go be a radio DJ. So in college, I worked at this AM station, so I just put together this like demo tape, they would call it, quote unquote demo tape, and I sent it off to some local Cleveland stations. And I remember I was, like 2 months went by, I got nothing, and I was walking to the Cleveland Marshall Law School, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna, no one, and my phone rang, and it was this radio station that said, we'll give you a shot, why don't you come on down? And I was like, what? From my demo tape. So I went there, and then from there I ended up getting an internship over at Q104, even though, because I was kind of in the middle of college. And then while I was there was an ad that said, no experience necessary, web designer. And I said, well, since I'm here already doing this radio gig, I might as well apply. 2 weeks later, I get a call that says, I want you to come down, show us what you have. So I went into the interview, and I didn't hear from this web company for a while, so I called up the one day and I said, you know, do I got the gig? And they said, well, look at your resume, I see you have an Eagle Scout. Why don't you come on down? So I got the radio gig, and then I got this internship at this web company, and the next thing you know, I'm started doing the things that I love. Now, it took me many, many years to actually become able to move out of my parents' home with those 2 jobs. But if you think about it, I did what I was told. I did go down the things that I love. And I think that's what drives the idea bank. It's the things that are going in there are the things that I feel as though I can have the highest contribution in, and that I really, really am passionate about. And I tell people, it's like, I'm not putting ideas in there how to become the next best plumber. I'm putting in things that are either music, web related, tech related. I mean, they're ideas that are still related to each other.
Right.
So it's just trying to figure out which one can you, a couple things is, one, can you get some that can get done? I kind of put them into buckets, like, can I get this one done within the next couple weeks? Probably. Is this something that is going to take me longer? Probably years. So you start creating goal lists based upon how much time these things probably will take. And then you have to also set up at the end of the year, what am I going to try to do this year? And we always joke about, what's your mantra this year? And you come up kind of with a mantra. And sometimes it takes me a couple months. Like, it could even be like February and I come up with it. But then I pretty much put everything underneath that mantra. It's kind of like my life mantra for that year. And then everything trickles down from the goals from that mantra. So it's constantly creating lists. It's constantly creating ideas. It's trying to figure out how much time is available, being very strict on your time management. For example, I try to monitor how much time I spend online. And sometimes it may only be an hour a week. How is that possible? Think about how much time you can get sucked into Instagram, TikTok, all these things. I'm not saying I'm not an angel for getting sucked into these things,
right.
But you need to set up time limits. Why? So you can get to your list of things you need to do, the other list, because you can instantly get pulled away
right.
by distractions.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And that takes discipline.
It does. Yeah, everything takes discipline. And time management, absolutely. I'm a big fan. I'm a geek, nerd, and all of that. You know, my Outlook, I use one calendar. My Outlook has everything in my life, all the different meetings associated with my business, Evolve Marketing, but I also have all my personal stuff in there
Reminders.
too. One calendar, so I see it, it's visible. And my wife makes fun of me, but yeah, I have go play with Presley, you know, my daughter. I want to make sure that I have time. It's easy to get caught up, especially when you're a leader, when you have big responsibilities as an owner or a leader in a company. So time management is absolutely key, and yeah, I'm going to have an episode just devoted to that, because I think there's a
whole process to it.
There is, and everybody's different.
There's books.
But just to hear, you know, what those, yeah, there's some really great books on time management as well. But I want to go back to kind of that fulfillment piece, you know, in the passions. And I love how you phrase it. It's all about a journey, right? It's embrace the journey. It takes time, and I think for young folks that might be listening, don't be afraid to try different things and fail, right? Mistakes are only lessons, and that's how we grow. And then you find what you really love and what you're passionate about. And then maybe you have an idea when you're young, but oftentimes that changes, and that's okay. It really is. But if you find it, very few people are able to do what they do every single day. That is their gift. Why? Everyone is meant to be here for a reason. If you can really tap into why you're supposed to be here and what you're supposed to contribute to the community, that's a beautiful thing. And I think that's where kind of that passion, fulfillment comes in. And then if you have these other hobbies like music or writing or poetry or sports, you have to carve that in. You have to make time for yourself. You know, the best investment you can make is on yourself. And that investment is not selfish. That is going to trickle out to everyone you serve, everybody in your community, right? So
Yeah.
that's beautiful, man.
Yeah, sometimes it means giving up things that you also love, but that's where we always joke about this. You make that pros and cons list. You sleep on it. There's theories. There's many books. I wrote a couple books, but some of the things that I've read in other books, there's one by Daniel Pink called When, that talks about knowing your chronotype. And a lot of people don't think about that, but to me, I'm a big fan of understanding how you function, so that way then you understand your strengths and weaknesses, and you know when there's a time of the day you don't want to make a big decision, and that book talks about that specifically.
Right.
But there are things like that where, sure, you have to know yourself, but then that passion that we talk about, that's something that you can't make up. So if you're going to be doing something, if you're working towards something, that passion helps you get over the top sometimes when you're low, and you know that this is something that I love to do, so I'm going to keep going.
Right. That's the energy bus. Yeah. The passion. Yeah. And that's just it. When things are tough, when you're doing what you love, it doesn't seem like work. You know, and that's what I'm sure you...
It's a cliche again, but it's true.
Yeah, it is. And I think, you know, this is what I try to teach my kids. You know, find something you really love to do, because you're going to do it the rest of your life, and you're going to spend a lot of time at work, unfortunately. So just find something that doesn't feel like work, but also is meaningful, that has an impact. And that's where the goal is. That's the goal.
Yeah, and you brought up one of my passions, which is DJing. And I've done that for a long time. And one day I had to sit back where someone asked me, why do you do it? Is it about the music? And I started thinking about it. I'm a person that I'm listening more about the beat. Like, I don't really listen to the lyrics of the songs. Of course, I do when I'm playing an event where I have to make sure it's the clean edit and things like that.
Right.
But my point, though, is it's all about the reaction of the crowd. Trying to make a memorable event for them. Because you think about the events you go to, weddings, funerals, family parties, there aren't a lot of events where you bring a lot of people together.
So let's talk about the education piece for a minute.
Sure.
As someone deeply committed to education, I know you've always been committed to this. What inspired you to start teaching? And what do you find most rewarding about it?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I'm going to make another scouting reference again, but if you think about this, if from an early age, your goal is to constantly learn and try to learn new skills. There's a scene, I always think about this from The Matrix, and think about, Neo, but he gets into a helicopter and he's like, learn how to fly a helicopter, and it downloads into his brain, and then a couple minutes later he's able to fly a helicopter. And it always makes me think about when you're earning merit badges or when you're learning, you're like, oh, now I know how to canoe. Now I'm a certified, I know how to swim and do CPR, and you start gaining all these skills, and all of a sudden you feel empowered that you now have this knowledge. And you remember the old knowledge is power, was that Schoolhouse Rocks from back in the day?
Schoolhouse Rocks, yeah, I love those.
Yeah, it empowers you. So it started me thinking, okay, so I'm learning, and then part of scouting, they call it the EDGE method, whereas you are able to really show someone how it's done, you guide them how to do it, and then you enable them to do it on their own. So you're taught from an early age in scouting to, guide someone how to do something themselves. So you're already teaching at an early age already. The thing that I think did it for me was when I was in high school. I was voted in grade school and then early in my high school career as the, class clown. I would be the guy that would be, joking around.
Really?
And I had his name was Dennis, and I was his lab partner.
Is that Dennis the Menace?
His name was Dennis Densler. And he turned to me, he's like, so why do you act so silly when actually you seem like you're smart? And all of a sudden the whole world started spinning around me, that I was like, am I not applying myself? Because I learned so much in scouting, and I always was there, but since I was always kind of had that entertainment bug in me, all of a sudden just something snapped at me that said, I've got to take this more seriously. I've got to really be able to learn more. So from that moment, I started figuring out that I have to focus better on what I have in front of me. But it wasn't until college. So in college, something happened where I went to Bowling Green, and the computer system put me in the honors dorm, even though I wasn't an honors student. And all of a sudden I started absorbing all these honor students' habits. Like, for example, my roommate, Ray, would stay up really late and be constantly typing on his computer, like writing these essays, while I would look around and most of the other dorms had their lights off. But he was determined, I'm going to get my PhD. I'm going to be a professor one day. And so all of a sudden I started saying, I'm going to turn my light on. So then I started typing and working really late, and you start emulating those around you. So that's the other thing with leadership is look around you and see, are there qualities that you want to emulate from others that are positive, that can empower you? And then that led me to, well, if they want to be a teacher, then maybe I should be a teacher. Maybe I can try this. So when I started my web design career, I thought, well, I went and purchased a few web design books. Remember Kelly Goto? Remember?
Yeah.
Goto. I bought her book, but it was written in all this like jargon. And so I went and I purchased it for my Cuyahoga Community College students, and they all read it and went, Professor, I don't understand what this means. And that's what made me write my first book. I'm going to write a book that's in common language that people understand. So I think that's what drives it. I think teaching is you start at a young age. You are really molded by others around you, but then you also want to teach someone what you know, but you want to put it in your own words,
right,
so that it can resonate with them. And sure, you might be able to refer to someone else's, but I think part of the idea process also is trying to find analogies that people understand that hasn't been done before. And I think that also helps. So that's where some of the ideas come in, is where you're trying to merge in two different ideas into one to try to create an analogy.
Gotcha.
I know there's a lot there to unpack.
Yeah, no, there is, but I think it comes back to two themes that have been the central theme of this conversation, which is mentorship. You love mentoring, so giving back, and being a servant leader, or just living a servant life. So that's giving back, mentoring, coaching, sharing your wealth of experience in a way that somebody can understand it. And that is the challenge. And students can be challenging. And I taught for many years. You got me into Cuyahoga Community College, and that was great. I loved teaching there. Way different than a typical university. Those kids, adults they were ready.
Right. Non-traditional students.
Non-traditional, mainly evenings, and they were really focused and determined and open to your ideas. And I, like you, would bring tons of references and really pour into it, hoping, if you can inspire one student. And I'll just share a story. Most recently, there was a student I had when I was teaching at the University of Akron in corporate identity class, my favorite class. And she was a great student. I knew she was going to do well. And we've stayed in touch over the years, and she was a creative director at several ad agencies. And then that agency got acquired, and she went out and she just said, I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to freelance. And then she started her own business, creating thank you cards and personal cards and stickers and all these fun little items that you can buy, and it's really great stuff. But all that to say that I purchased one of her thank you card sets as a gift, to one of my friends this past holiday, and then I let her know. I said, hey, I just wanted, she saw my name on it in the purchase, and then she emailed me and said thank you, sent me a nice thank you, one of her thank you cards in the mail, but thank you. So great. I never thought I'd have, one of my mentors or a professor purchase one of my things. So it was a full circle moment, and it kind of got teary-eyed. It was like, this is very cool. And that's why we do it, right? It's those moments of inspiration when you can inspire somebody to do something or to be better, to grow, and that's really all we're trying to do, right? And that's what leadership's all about. So,
yeah, I agree with you.
So looking back on your numerous accomplishments, what are you most proud of? I know this is going to be a tough one for you, but if you could pick one, what would that be and why?
Yeah, that's hard. I mean, you kind of think of, this thing recently where it's like Taylor Swift eras, where you look back.
Right.
So I would probably have to look back at pinpoints. I don't know if I can nail it down to one thing in my career. I would say that starting out just randomly answering an ad out of the back and starting as an intern and working there for 90 days at no pay and then get hired on, to me, that was one of the first amazing things, was that I decided not to follow this career path that I thought I was going to do because some professor told me I should try it, and then follow my own passion, and then ends up that 20 something plus years later I'm still in the industry.
Right. So that's the radio station?
Yeah, that was, so I think that moment, you even go back before that, you talk about Eagle Scout, that was a really challenging thing to get. I was the only one in my whole class that got it because our troop had disbanded and I had to find another troop to get it. And that took extra effort, but I was determined. I'm going to get this thing. So I think now that I'm talking about this and thinking about this, I think the one thing, and it may come across as maybe cliche, it may come across as maybe not an honest answer, but I really think it's just having the opportunity to learn, which is weird if you think about that. So think about my background. I was adopted. but I ended up I was able to go to college. I was able to then go for a master's degree. When I went for the master's degree when I was at Hyland, I was part of their tuition assistance program where they paid for my entire degree because I worked there.
Yeah.
And so how lucky is that to get part of a company that supports your education?
Right.
So I just think it's that opportunity. And you look back, sure, I've written books, I've done albums, I've done all that stuff, but to me it's just been how I can artistically express myself and get the thoughts out of my head onto something that someone can digest. And if you think about it, you look back at books people have written, songs that people have written, sometimes it could take someone 12 albums before they're hit. I mean, you look at like REO Speedwagon, that I think it took them 12 albums if you want to go back in the 80s. Or some artist that gets a little clip on TikTok that now they're working a fast food restaurant. Next thing you know, they've got 1 million views and they're going back out on tour.
Journey.
So
This lead singer.
yeah, you never know.
Right.
So I think it's hard for me to pinpoint one because I could say one today and then tomorrow it could be something different. So to me, I think it's going back to that gratitude thing of just having the opportunity to work on the passions that you love and be able to share them with people. And maybe it's because we were born in the internet era where you could just release whatever online. Think about that.
Right.
People never had that opportunity in the past. So
right.
It's really hard. I don't think I can give you a particular answer.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. You have so many. I thought it would be tough. I thought you would say books because I know you really, really wanted to publish a book, and you published 2.
Yeah.
But you also published 5 albums. So you've done so many things. But
yeah.
I love your answer and I do think that is really honest. To me, it's about you're really embracing the journey. Every journey is different. You're just embracing all of these moments, but you're also being selective and you're being intentional about where you spend your time. And you're spending time on the things you love to do. That's what life's all about, man. Like you're living out, your
You said something interesting. I was thinking about this. So the last book I released was a few years ago. That book took me 10 years to create. People go, 10 years. Well, so I had the idea, and
in the draft box.
It actually was a phone call. So the book starts out with this story. So spoiler alert, if you're going to purchase the book, I'll give you a little tidbit. But I was driving, and my other friend Todd called me, and he said, "Hey Mark, do you realize you're doing the same 2 things?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Pull over." I go, "No." He's like, "Pull over, I got to tell you." So I pull over. And basically DJing and user experience design, he told me on a phone call they're the same 2 things. And I go, "Oh my gosh, I got to write about this.
Yeah.
How am I going to figure this out?" But so you plan about it, you start writing it down, and I never thought that book was ever going to get completed. But it wasn't until the being at home, and you think about COVID times. So was COVID a gift, or was it a bad thing that happened? A lot of people were able to create music. They were able to do a lot of things they couldn't do before. So they changed it into something positive. Mm-hmm. So you think about that. If that wouldn't have happened, I would have never been able to create that book because I had the time to go and do that.
Right.
So you don't know. I mean, tomorrow, for all we know, aliens could land and say, "Hello, Todd. Welcome." And then all of a sudden the world is different again.
Right.
And now we have to adjust to that.
Right.
You think right now AI, everyone's talking about, AI can do writing and that's taking over the world. Well, sure, it is. But how are you going to figure out how to dance with AI or use it in your day-to-day?
Right.
Start using it.
Right. Right.
We could go on and on about that.
Right. There's always something. Technology. You just have to shift, right? It's all about shifting and adjusting, evolving. I mean, that's essentially all we're doing. And change is good. Change is good.
It's hard.
Our brains love change. It fires off those neutrons, right? Gets the dopamine pumping. Like we really do love change. As much as we may not think it, It is really
in small increments, right?
Yeah, it's small. Yeah, small doses. Absolutely. I want to circle back to failure for a moment.
Let's do that, yeah.
You know, the infamous F word. And I really do hate that word. I'm doing an episode solely on failure, and I talk about, you know, can we call it just what it is, which is growth. Let's quit saying fail forward, failure, da-da-da-da. Just call it what it is, growth. You know, without failure, without those mistakes, we can't grow. That is the best way to learn. And for those of us that have been perfectionists most of our lives, that can be a tough thing, and it took me a while to get there. But I guess I just, you know, I love to share with the audience because I feel like people are afraid to take risks. You know, and right. you've taken so many risks because you have so many different passions. And you've, you know, on the outset, it looks like, man, this guy is super successful. 5 albums, 2 books, master's degree, going for his doctorate, very successful, 25 years in the career that he loves. But I'm sure there were some bumps along the road. And we don't have to dig into the actual bumps, but just tell us about how have you handled those bumps and those failures, and you know, any advice you could give to listeners.
Sure. So I was thinking about this, and you mentioned earlier that I also have a podcast called Tunesmate, and we interview artists and we talk about music. But one of the common threads that I found interviewing musicians, and this is something that I started realizing, well, wait a minute, I think this just relates to life, period, is that they have many different ways that they keep active. For example, I can go on tour, I can teach music lessons, I can sell albums, I can teach, I can go play on a soundtrack to a movie, I can do all these things. One of them is probably going to be the majority of the breadwinner that you're going to be focusing on. But you see, it's still underneath the music umbrella. So if, for example, right now, music artists aren't making any more money on selling music anymore. You know, that was a thing that was like in the 80s and 90s, probably died around 2000. So they're making money touring. So now you have to figure out, how do I tour? How do we get out there and do that? Some of the aging musicians can't.
Right.
So they then have to pick up a residency, or they have to do something different. But I think that's the key. I think if you can keep yourself, obviously you want to try to keep yourself in one genre. Like I said earlier, I made about the plumbing example.
Right.
I'm a professional plumber, and also I own a digital marketing company. That might be challenging, but with underneath a very specific spectrum, you may be able to branch out, and then maybe at different points, as the market shifts, you then focus more on one thing and then another, and you're going to fail. I mean, you're going to go, oh yeah, right now I'm going to go on tour, and then you realize that you can't succeed just playing acoustic guitar. I'm probably going to have to bring in some other band members, or
right.
I'm going to have to make some adjustments, or maybe I have to figure out how to get more into the studio and start recording some soundtracks for some podcast series or something. So I think that's what I've learned is part of the journey is you're going to try something, it's not going to work out, but it's okay because you got 4 other things you can fall back on. I think a lot of us putting everything into one thing, which is good, but you still should keeping those other plates spinning, so if something does go wrong, you can shift over to something else. And I think that's a hard thing for people to do, because once again, with time management, well, how do I do that if, I got to go spend time doing this other thing? Now, I'm not saying that you can't go out and you can't enjoy yourself or do other things, but you have to figure out how to put limitations around that so that you can keep those other plates spinning, which is hard.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's also about just if you're doing what you love, going back to fulfilling your passion, so what? You're happy. So what if it fails? At least you tried it, right? You have no regrets. And you did or are doing what you enjoy doing.
I worked that first web company I worked at, I was there for 5 years. and we were 5 different names in 5 years. We moved 4 different places, if you remember that early turbulent era. And I'll never forget, I was sitting at my desk the one day, and they came to me, and this was on a Thursday. They said, "What are you working on right now?" I said, "I just completed all my projects." They said, "Great." They came in on a Friday, they handed me a slip that said, "You're gone. Since you're not working on anything, we're doing a little simplification here."
Okay.
So I walked out the front door with my box, and my manager pulled up in front of me with this convertible that came down, and he said, "By the way, I want to let you know, I got fired too. We're moving across the street, we're forming a new company. You're a director now." So within a moment of calling my mom, thinking like, what just happened? In a matter of moments, now I've got to build a website and have a team and have to do all this stuff. So once again, that living in the moment, it's difficult, but like we said, is those are the things that I've learned. Like when that happened to me, I thought I failed. I was here, it's my first job. I guess I'm not valuable, they let me go. And you really start doubting yourself. And then within 5 minutes, you're like, no, I'm good.
It's how you rebound, right? Yeah, you got to be able to rebound quickly, get back on that horse. So
Don't give up.
Don't give up. That's right. And all the different things you've done, all your accomplishments over the years. Is there anybody that's been like a huge mentor to you or a big inspiration?
Yeah. Well,
that's probably a tough one. There's probably many, but anybody that sticks out.
I think it goes back to the beginning. It's your family, your mom, your dad. They instill in you. They always gave me the freedom to explore. For example, how I started playing piano. One day I went over my aunt's house and they had an old organ down in their basement. One of those old church organs. You flip it on.
We had one.
And I flipped it on and I started playing, and I looked up on the stairs and there was like 50 of my family members, and they're like, "You could play?" I'm like, "I don't know, I just made up a song." So within a week, I walk in my house. My mom bought me a piano and put it in the basement and said, "Start learning."
Gotcha.
Start playing. So you think about it, it's one of those things where if you're supported and you're able to just keep trying to make yourself better, that really leaves. So my parents helped me, and I try to instill that. And it's hard because you come away with a lot of examples in your life, but I think a lot of everything I referenced here started early. And I think that resonates. And I think that's why I think it's important not to go on a tangent, but if you think about with mentoring, generally most people are earlier in their careers. Some may be coming in, but that's why it helps at the beginning to give them the roots so they can explore. And I think it's important when it's early in that development process. That's why it's so key to be part of it, because you can go many different directions and you may not be able to rebound as fast because you didn't have a strong beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we've all had mentors in our life and different people that have inspired us. I did want to share one of mine as well.
Please.
So this has been about 20 some years ago. You and I were working together, shared a cube. Here I had been at this company for a decent amount of time, and I had done just about anything that I could do or that was done, and I was really in a rut. My marriage was failing. It was not healthy. Career-wise, again, I had done everything. There wasn't a whole lot to do at the company, and I was very proactive in trying to find things. And I don't know, I wasn't in a great place. And here comes this guy walking in, Marc Majers, sits right next to me, shares a cube. And I don't think I've ever told you this, but I had a little bit of imposter syndrome, a little bit of envy, because I'm like, this guy's got it together, man. I was so impressed by you. You were using the latest technology, and we were web designers. You were taking advantage of CSS, one of the newest technologies at the time. And I don't know, I just felt like you were all about learning and growth. And for me, I was very stagnant and complacent where I was at. I needed a boost. And whether you recognize it or not, you gave me that boost. You were a huge inspiration for me at a time when I really needed it most. And it's funny how the world works, and when people come in and out of your life, right? I am a true believer in everything happens for a reason.
Me too.
And it was really cool, and I'm grateful for you coming into my life at that moment. And then you and I became very close friends, and in fact, you DJ'd my wedding. Now, I don't know if you know this, but you are the only person that has seen me breakdance twice. Because you're the DJ and you play the right tunes and you call me out, so I gotta go out. But
Nucleus, come on.
Nucleus, jam on it. So I guess I just want to say thank you for inspiring me. And you didn't even have to do anything. I was just watching. I was just watching and learning.
I'm gonna throw it back at you. So I probably never told you this either. So when I started, we were, cube to cube, and I knew I was coming in. There was another designer, and I was like, I really need to, step up my game, and this is because I came from, just a lot of kind of like mom and pop kind of shops and stuff. So you inspired me because we ended up going to that web conference together.
Oh yeah.
And then on the flight, you came up with your idea for your whole agency. I came up with the first book idea, and so we're going to do this. So to me, I always thought of it was like instant chemistry. It was like boom,
Right.
let's just do this. We kind of fed off each other.
Right.
And there were times where you would go here and I would go there, and we just keep raising it up and raising it up and raising it up, and we go, let's step away. I think we've inspired each other too much at this point.
Yeah, right. But we've pushed each other as well.
And I think that's another key point of the discussion here that I'm thinking about, is that with mentorship, it's a two-way street.
Right.
I always tell all of the people I mentor, I'm learning from you just as much as you're learning from me.
And it can be from a peer.
It can be from a peer. Well, like when I was teaching, remember my first class, I told everybody that this is the one way I know how to use Photoshop, because we were talking about like clipping around an image, and I knew there was another way, like putting a path on
There's
there.
a million different ways of doing
And I
everything.
said, I'm going to show you, I can do this in 5 minutes quickly. And I imagined there's probably another way. And I had people, I said, let's just try this way. And then I came over to another student that eventually became a creative director down the road too. And they said, well, here's the clipping path. I said, well, that's great. Let's show everybody that. We put their screen on there, and all of a sudden I learned clipping path the same day. I could still do it the original way faster, though, just so you know. But I did learn clipping path. But still, you learn things and you go, once again, being open,
Right.
learning, because that's the thing, when you're learning, you're always humble. Think about that.
Right.
If you constantly are open to learn.
Oh man, yeah, that's good. That's a great way to kind of cap things off, Mark. It's all about having an empty cup and just being open-minded, leading, learning, growth, continuous growth, mentoring.
Yeah, and I will tell you, as we said earlier, it isn't automatic. I mean, every day you're going to wake up and you may not be willing to learn something new. You may not be willing to do that. That's why I think it's important to put reminders. You've said you got your calendar, but one other thing I would say is, if you're sitting in front of your computer monitor, your laptop, if it's a post-it note, if it's whatever, you want to do a digital one, write yourself things to remind yourself that, what was the one thing you learned? Or write yourself, something that says, maybe I need to limit how much time I'm spending today on blank and focus on something else. And those little reminders, those will help you. And I know a lot of these help books tell you that, but how often do you do that? That's the reality.
Oh yeah, I do all the time. And a daily journal. I have a daily journal. Literally 5 minutes I spend.
Write things down.
I track 20 different habits, and a couple of the things that I do are I write down the things that I learned and where my wins were, how things were going through the day, what was my mood, what was my sleep. So but it comes back to just repetition, habit, But yeah, a daily journal, highly recommended. It's a great way to document not only ideas, but also things that have happened throughout the day, just to have that mental record of it. And it's a good practice to write to, old school, like literally write. I love it. I highly recommend it.
And what's interesting is, so I try the daily journal. I have a lot of friends that do that. It's been challenging for me for the daily journal. So what I've figured out is, for those that aren't able to do that, what I figured out is maybe it's the idea draft box. Maybe it's just getting an idea into your draft box a day. Maybe it's, for me, there's some days where, because I play piano every day, so that's kind of my way that I reflect. And there's some times where I just rest my hand on the keyboard, and it's a chord I never heard of before, and I go, and all of a sudden, I'm writing a song. Right. So maybe it's just some way for you to express something. Maybe that's writing down an idea, putting an idea in the draft box, writing a song, writing a poem, something. If you are unable to get into that rhythm, and I know it takes discipline, so I feel like I'm on the wagon and I'm off the wagon on that. But I do know that I'm definitely generating something every day.
Yeah. No, I love that. And that is a great, I never thought of it like that, but the draft box strategy is kind of a method of journaling. It's just really getting the thoughts down. But
getting thoughts down.
And I'll admit, my practice, that took a couple of years. So that didn't happen overnight. To be able to journal, So
right.
Everything just takes time. It's about the small shifts, and not beating yourself up because you tried it didn't work. Everything just takes time. It's repetition. It goes back to one of my favorite quotes of all time, which is by the poet Ovid. And he states that water dripping can bore through a stone, not through force, but with persistence. And that's all about being consistent. Just practice, get the reps in. Eventually you'll get there. And it takes about 21 days for a new habit to form. So they're tough, but habits are the key to life. Good or bad. They're
Power of Habit.
Whether you know it or not.
It's a good book. I would definitely recommend that one too.
Yeah. Atomic Habits.
That's another one that was built, inspired by that one too. Yeah, I've read that one as well.
Well, speaking of books, and we're at the end of the show here. What are some of your favorite leadership books, or anything that you would recommend to our listeners? And what are you reading right now?
Yeah, there's so many. The one that I just completed was Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's called Be Useful. And you think, well, what is he going to share with the world? And I thought it was interesting. It's 7 rules that he follows, but he tells stories about how he failed and how in and out. And he's like, go Google what happened with my marriage. That's fine. Let's get that out of the way.
Right.
But let's focus on these principles. And that inspired me. I think all these books we read, you try to pull out what the nugget is and try to see how you can bring that into your life. You're probably not going to do all 7 of them, but there may be something. And to me, that's hard because I used to listen to a lot of audiobooks prior to the pandemic, and it's been harder, but I've been getting back to audiobooks. So to me, is sometimes I go halfway through the audiobook and then I finish it in print, or so I've been all over the place. But to me, that's been the most recent one. Just completed that one.
Okay.
But there's so many out there. I mean, you can go back. There's the classics that are out there that could probably provide a link at the end. Big list of them.
Gotcha.
I can probably go down.
Oh, I'm sure.
I want me to categorize them.
I'm sure.
These are for time management. These we over here for building habits.
Yeah.
Can go all the way down. These are for user experience leadership.
I'm sure you have a list. We'll add it to the show notes for sure. Cool. But Arnold, I'm a big fan of Arnold. In fact, mentioned it in the podcast about manifestation. He has a great show on Netflix that talks about his journey I think it's only 3 episodes. Probably was the impetus of that book, because I don't recall him mentioning a book in that. But his mantra throughout life has really been visualization or manifestation, and we see him where he's at now.
He talks about
and
that.
He's at the top, and he's been the hero in all these blockbuster movies, and the governor of California, and he's done some really, really big things, but he failed a lot, and his journey was not easy. And talking about following your passion, his parents, nobody wanted him to go into bodybuilding. What kind of life?
Right.
What are you going to build on that?
Yeah.
But he loved it, and it allowed him to do other things, right? And build this ecosystem that all kind of tied together. So he's a very inspirational guy. I love his story.
Yeah, that principle in the book, he calls that think big. So you start big, and then it's easier to narrow it down to something. So he wants you to start there. And if you start visualizing it, like I'm going to be a movie star one day, then it will happen.
Cool. Well, I have a book for you as well. So I have 2 books here that you can choose from. 2 of my favorite books that I love to gift. One is The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari by Robin Sharma. Excellent book. And The Go-Giver by Bob Berg and John Mann. So 2 excellent books.
I haven't
Which
read
one do
either.
you like? I'm going to go with The Go-Giver.
All right.
That's all.
I'll take your recommendation.
That's all about you. That is a
thank you.
Wonderful book.
Appreciate that.
Mark, it's been wonderful reconnecting with you. Any time that I get to spend with you is time well spent. Obviously, we always inspire each other. We push each other. There's always great ideas that come out of it. Lots of just great energy, which is what it's all about. Having wonderful relationships in your life that are meaningful, positive. That's what it's all about. And that's what you and I have, and I hope that this episode inspires others as well. Really appreciate you being here today. How can people connect with you and learn all about, purchase the book or find out about some of the music that you've published?
Sure. I mean, I could probably tell you hundreds of places to go, but probably the easiest place would just be my website, just MARCM. So Mark M. And I had somebody say wow, you must have got that a long time ago. Well, yeah, I've been in the web industry for a while.
Smart.
So just my first name and then my last initial .com.
MarkM.com. Excellent. We'll have that in the show notes as well. Thanks, my friend. Appreciate you being on the Bolt.
No problem. I'll say one last thing. We both shared a manager back in the day, Krista. And I'll never forget that on their monitor, they had a little thing taped. Remember those big CRT monitors that had the green screen on them? Old school.
Yeah.
And the one day I walked in there and I was like, that is the most amazing quote I've ever seen in my life. It said, if you stop learning, you stop leading. And I was like, what? This is going to be
That's mic drop right there.
The best place and that was like on day 1 or day 2 of working.
I missed that. Where was I at? I missed that.
And
but
so I wrote that down, and that was like, I had ever since then, and I've Googled it. It's not attributed to anyone.
Really?
Yeah.
It's pretty broad.
It says unknown, and I was like,
unknown. I love that even more, right?
But it just makes you go like,
yeah.
And I've tried to rewrite it and come up with another way to say it. I'm like, that's the only way.
That's it, man.
So that's what I think about a lot. So.
That's how we end. If you stop learning, you stop growing. And honestly, you stop living. We'll just add to it.
Thank you, Todd.
Thank you, brother. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. You are on your way to growth, transformation, and joy. If you find this episode helpful, please like and share with your friends, and by all means, please leave a review. You can also view the show notes and subscribe to the Bolt newsletter at toddbertsch.com. Remember, real change takes time. Start small and watch the growth take shape.